The last couple of weeks, I've been meeting a lot of new people at focus groups for our bishop search and at a conference for continuing education. They often ask me, how long have you been at St. John's? I say I started in April 2020. We moved into our house in Columbus the day the bars and restaurants shut down. And people wince. They say, gosh, that must have been tough. It was. It was the strangest, most difficult beginning to a ministry I'm ever likely to have. St. John's was entirely online when I got here. I didn't have an in-person service for more than 4 months. I had to get to know the parish over Zoom. Even with members of the staff and vestry, we didn't meet face-to-face for months until we were confident we could get together outdoors without killing anyone. I never want to go through that again. But most days, I think I had it easy. In fact, most days I think anyone who's found St. John's any time in the last 2 years has had it easy. Because we don't remember what this community was like before COVID. I know only what this church is like now. And those of you who joined St. John's before 2020 have had it harder because you remember what this parish used to be. Although we lost only one member to COVID, Sally Gibbler, other pillars of this parish, Jackie Browning, Lori Rogenkamp, Ed Pasco, people you could count on being here because they'd always been here, they died during the shutdown and you didn't get to say goodbye. Others moved away or stopped attending St. John's and they haven't been back in person. Committees that had their problems but were more or less functioning, like hospitality and adult formation, they don't really exist anymore. They might have ended up there anyway several years from now, but COVID sped up changes that were already happening. The clergy and music staff are completely different. The pandemic didn't cause any of the turnover, but it happened while COVID was disrupting everything. As Stephen Sollers observed, we're not the same church we were 3 years ago. Those of you who were here 3 years ago may look around on Sunday mornings and wonder, where is everyone? Who are these people I've never seen before? What's happened to the church I used to love? I'm going to suggest something, and you can disagree with it. I just want to see how it lands. I want to suggest that St. John's died in March of 2020. The way this faith community used to be died. And for those of you who were here before 2020, that may be deeply painful. The loss you feel might be the same as when a person you love dies. It's that kind of grief. For some, the loss is so painful they can't be part of this community anymore. It's the same reason people often move after a spouse dies, or why they can't bear to eat at the restaurant that you always used to meet a beloved friend for dinner in. Because it hurts too much to be in this space and see how it is now and remember the way it used to be. And it is not coming back. St. John's will never be the same as it was before COVID. This is not unique to St. John's. Surveys have found that for some years now, the only religious affiliation that is growing in America is no affiliation at all. Conservative churches were adding members for a while, but they are now shrinking too. The pandemic sped up these changes that were already happening. Many congregations ran out of money or people and had to close. Others were so torn by conflict over masks and vaccines that some folks couldn't take it anymore and left. The polarization of American society alienated others from church. Some who'd been regular churchgoers realized they didn't miss church and didn't feel the need to attend again. I want to suggest that the whole capital C church died in March of 2020. And the way things used to be is not coming back. Except for those of us who are new to Christianity, we are all grieving the death of the church we knew. How does that land with you? Does that describe what you've experienced? We're nearing the end of the Gospel according to Luke, and we've reached the end of Jesus' life. Pilate has condemned him to death. The leaders are scoffing at him. The soldiers are mocking him. Jesus has been warning his followers that this was going to happen. His ministry was always going to lead to him suffering and dying on the cross. What his followers didn't want to hear, what we often don't want to hear, is that suffering and death will happen to us too. Jesus has been really clear about that. Following him means dying. This is not a metaphor. Jesus died. He was dead and buried in the tomb. And the same thing will happen to his followers. All of us who were baptized into Jesus' death. As the water of baptism poured over us, we were united with Jesus in a death like his. Nothing lives forever. Not Jesus, not his followers, not the church, which is the body of Jesus Christ. All of us die. As Jesus was dying, as the leaders were scoffing and the soldiers were mocking, Jesus was not alone. The people stood by watching Jesus on the cross. Crucifixion is an awful way to die. It's humiliating, it's bloody and painful. Victims of crucifixion slowly suffocate to death under the weight of their own bodies. Yet the people stood by watching, bearing witness. All of us who've had to nurse a loved one through illness, whether it's a small child with an ear infection or an adult with cancer, we know how difficult it is to bear witness to another person's suffering. It costs us to stand by someone who's in pain. But that's what you do when you love someone. The people standing by watching were saying with their presence, we're not going to turn away because it's hard. We're staying with you because we love you, because your suffering is real, because you need us to bear witness to your dying. And perhaps that's what all of you who loved St. John's as it used to be, all of us who loved the capital C Church as it used to be, are called to do now. To bear witness to their death, to the realness of the suffering and pain and dying. Not to deny it, but to say, yes, this was real. This happened. We're near the end of the Gospel of Luke. We're not at the end. Jesus died. He was buried in the tomb. Then 3 days later, Mary Magdalene and the other women went to the tomb and found Jesus gone and 2 angels in his place. The angels proclaimed that Jesus was risen. This is the story of Christianity. Jesus died and God raised him from the dead. With God, death always leads to resurrection. But you can't get to resurrection by skipping over death. We've all got to die to be raised. And the new life of resurrection is not the same as the life we had before. When the risen Jesus appeared to the disciples in the Gospel of John, he still had wounds in his hands and feet and side. Death marked Jesus. It left marks on his body. It had to mark his heart and spirit too. You can't go through death without getting a radically new perspective on life. Resurrection changed Jesus. It will change us too. For we were baptized into Jesus' death so that we might be raised in a resurrection like his, so that St. John's and the whole church might be raised with Jesus. And there are signs of resurrection already here, signs of the St. John's that will be. In the last year, we've added 27 households to our database. That's 71 individuals. Half of them are attending worship regularly in person. So far, 9 of those new households have made financial pledges indicating an ongoing commitment to St. John's. 2 weeks ago on All Saints Sunday, 5 people were baptized, 2 adults and 3 toddlers. We've got 2 more baptisms already set for January and 2 more planning for baptism at Pentecost next May. The annual giving tree for students and families at Kilbourne Middle School kicked off last weekend. And I'm sorry to say, y'all, the gift tags are gone. You'd better sign up online today or else you might be left out. When David or I get together with newcomers to welcome them to St. John's, many of them tell us they have been hurt or disillusioned or damaged by other forms of Christianity. And here they find a healing community. They find the faith rooted in the love and joy of Jesus that they've been looking for. That's what the resurrected St. John's can be. A church that opens its arms to all and shares Jesus' love and joy with those who are craving that good news. Resurrection does not wipe away the reality of death and grief. As we bear witness to the death of St. John's, the death of the church, we grieve with hope. We remember the church we've lost. We let ourselves feel the sadness and pain. We cry if we need to. And we know that death is not the end for Jesus or for us. That with God, death always, always, always leads to resurrection. We trust that God is making all things new, including St. John's, including the whole church, including you and me.